Good. How are you, Rachel?
Morning.
Fine, thank you. You?
Good. Baruch Hashem. Okay. We welcome you back, Debbie.
Thank you. My pleasure
Okay.
to be back.
Very
Thank you
good.
all very much.
Okay, so Parshat-Emor is on page 672, and thank you, Dov, for setting us up over here.
I think somebody else did it.
Okay, well, thanks to whoever did the setting up. Okay, so Parshat-Emor actually is a continuation of sorts of the previous Parsha, which is Parshat Kedoshim. Parshat Kedoshim began, Kedoshim Tihiyu, you shall be holy, Ki Kadosh Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Because I, Hashem, your God, I am holy. How do we define Kadosh? How do we define holiness? I'm putting that out there.
Separateness?
Separateness. Okay, so what do you mean?
Like many kinds of things in the Torah that are holy are somehow separated. Like God made the earth by separation, or things that
Okay.
are kosher are separate.
Okay, so what are we meant to separate from?
Ordinary from
Separate the spiritual and the temporal.
Okay, Hamavdil ben Kodesh L'chol, between the spiritual and the temporal, the holy and the mundane. Okay, nice. Any other ideas out there?
something that you're in awe from.
So you want to say Kedusha is something that is awe-inspiring. But then we have a problem. Yafi, how do we understand Kedoshim Tihiyu? You shall be holy.
Yeah, so it's.
Could
Chai Rivka?
Well, it seems like, I had this thought before, just a moment ago, that we should, when we separate separate on the side of Hashem.
Okay.
So, yeah.
To separate ourselves
And our lives.
and our lives
And our
towards
thoughts and our
towards
lives
towards the spiritual, towards the holy.
spiritual.
Nice,
Yes.
Amy?
So when you say separate, I think of like the braids of the challah, the strands of the challah, but then you braid it together and you put it together too.
Okay. So so you're
that-
making an interesting point, right? Are we supposed to separate from the physical? Is that the ideal?
No.
Or the ideal, right, that we would call prisha, right? The ideal is not really to separate from the physical, but to sanctify, to uplift the physical, right? That's why a marriage is called kedushin, right? In a marriage, what we're doing is we're taking that physical relationship and sanctifying it and making it. Well, I can't use the word sanctifying, right? That's kadosh, right? And bringing the physical into the spiritual realm. Yeah, Dov.
The overcoming gravity to the pool is like down, and Hashem.
Okay.
Saying,
Okay. A thought that I've had is that we say that everything in the physical world is actually a glimmer, a shadow of what's happening in the spiritual realm. And in the physical realm, we have gravity. What is gravity? We get pulled down, right? There's a force pulling us down. Right? That's why amongst Hasidim, dance is a very important concept. Dance is leaving the shackles of the earth, right? You know, the first time a kid jumps, they're so excited. You know, that's the first time that they have defied gravity on their own, right? But there's a lot to that, the idea that we're trying to lift ourselves up. So that's and Kedoshim Tiyu, you should be holy because I, Hashem, am Kadosh, and therefore come to me, pull yourself towards me, lift yourselves from the shackles of this physical world, not by dropping it, not by ignoring it, but ideally by uplifting it. The Kohanim, who we're soon going to deal with, the Kohanim would eat from the korbanot, the sacrifices that were brought, and through their eating of the sacrifices, the bringers of those sacrifices would have their atonement. And actually, the Nefesh HaChaim says very interestingly, when we're eating the man was called, we called the man the lechem hakolokel, the strange sort of sustenance. And Rashi there explains that we would ingest it, but there was no elimination of any waste from it. It was purified food that did not need to, our body did not need to separate between the good, the tov, and the ra, between that which our body needs and that which we don't need. Right? This whole mixture came from the klala, the curse, onto the earth. And therefore the food that we eat from the earth, our body needs to separate the good and eliminate the bad, the waste. But that which came from the heavens, the man, that was not part of this curse, and therefore was completely ingested into the body, completely absorbed into the body, without there being any waste. And the Nefesh HaChaim says that which the Kohanim would eat also was on this level of the man, of the manna, that it was the spiritual food. It had been purified in a spiritual sense that is completely absorbed into the body. Let's go now to Emor on page 672. And when we're discussing Kedusha, holiness, what are the different areas where we have Kedusha, where there is holiness? And our Parsha is going to touch on on those three. Okay, there are three areas, domains, where we have this concept of Kedusha. Right? One of them is Zman, is time. We have Kedusha, holiness in time. Where do we have holiness in time? Shabbat is the classic holiness of time. And there is Makom, place. Where is the holiness of place? Yerushalayim, Beit HaMikdash, holy of holies. That is the Kedusha of Makom. And then there is the Kedusha of self, of Nefesh, of the person. So our Parsha actually is going to be a continuation of Kedoshim to you. It's going to be touching upon these three aspects of Kedusha, of holiness. Holiness of Nefesh, of soul, of person, holiness of time, and holiness of place. So let us get started over here. Who'd like to lead off for us in Hebrew? Marta, you want to give it a run?
ויאמר השם אל משה, אמור אל הכהנים בני אהרון, ואמרת להם לפני לו, הנפש לו, יטמא בימיו.
Good, one more.
כי אם לישרון קרוב עליו לאמור ולאביו לבנו ולביתו ולאחיו.
Good. Want to give us a run over here? Hashem said to Moses.
Sure. Hashem said to Moses, "Say to the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, and tell them, each of you shall not contaminate himself to a dead person among his people, except for the relative who is closest to him, to his mother, and to his father, to his son, to his daughter, and to his brother, and to his virgin sister who is close to him, who has not been wed to a man, to her shall he contaminate himself. The husband among his people shall not contaminate himself to one who desecrates him.
So when we're talking about well, we're going to deal with it. Don't worry.
Please.
Okay. Now we don't like the word contaminate. We've discussed this before.
Right.
Right. For tuma, Linda, why don't you?
Fine, thank you.
Yeah.
There's a chair there.
There's chairs over there.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Squeeze in.
Aaron's son was killed, right?
I'm sorry.
Aaron.
Yeah.
Aaron's two sons. But here says the sons of Aaron.
Okay. Okay. Oh, there's still two remaining sons.
Oh,
There are
yes,
4 sons
four
altogether.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's this line up here, totally not clear.
Okay. So this is talking about the kedusha of nefesh, of the soul of the person. Which people are the kadosh representatives of Israel? The Kohanim are. I just saw this morning very interesting. That I believe the Maharal says that the numerical value of Kohen, Kaf is 20, Hey is 5, Nun is 50, it's 75.
Yeah.
What would the significance be of 75?
It's divisible by 3.
True.
It's also divisible by 5.
4 by 5. Right? Right? But what do we know about 7 and 8?
7
And together you get 15.
No, but yes. But what does the number 7 represent? What does the number 8 represent? We discussed this in Parshat Shmini. What does 8 represent?
Spiritual.
7 is the holiness within the system. That's why we have 7 days of the week. We have Shabbos, right, within the system. 7 days of the week and Shabbos. We have 7 months, and then we have Tishrei, the month of Tishrei. We have 7 years. The 7th year is Shemitah, right? 7 is the holiness within the cycle. And what is 8? Going beyond. Right, the spiritual going beyond the cycle. The Shmini was the Beit HaMikdash and Chanukah and Brit Milah, circumcision. That's all going beyond the physical. So why would Kohen be 75?
It's in between.
It's the midpoint of the 7 and the 8. Right? So they are that flash point, that midpoint, that flash point where we connect the 7, the physical, and the 8, and that which goes beyond it. Okay, the main. No, go for it.
I'm not buying it.
Okay. Okay. Listen, I ply my wares, and no one's forced to buy anything over here.
What are you buying?
Ain't
It
honest.
makes sense to me.
Huh?
No,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay.
One quick thing. Every person, all the patriarchs, they all said the word kol, which is 25. So you have Abraham.
Kol is 50.
Like
Kol is not 25.
Huh?
Kol is 50.
How's it 50?
Kol divided by
Kaf is
2.
20. Lamed is 30.
No, there's no lamed.
Kol.
He took coal.
Oh, Kol. Oh, Kaf Hey.
That says Hashem, or so says Hashem.
Kol
And there's 3 times of that, of all 3, and Kohen adds up to, like you said.
Interesting. Okay.
Can I ask?
Yes.
This line, I don't understand. A husband, I don't have glasses, I lost them.
Okay. So, okay. So basically, hi, Lily. Good to see you.
Sorry, I'm late.
Okay.
Good. Where did you buy them?
Sorry for interrupting.
Not at all.
My fault.
It's good to see you, and good to see Amitai. Okay. So again, there's the kedusha there's the holiness of the soul of the person. That is the Kohen. The way that is expressed over here is that, and it's a halacha that we're very familiar with, that a Kohen does not go into a cemetery. Okay? A Kohen can only go into a cemetery if it is for the closest of relatives. The pasuk that you are not sure about over here, pasuk Dalid, is that even though a person, a Kohen, can be metame, right, to his wife, but pasuk 4 is saying if it's a woman that he was not allowed to marry, because a Kohen also has certain marriage restrictions. If he was not allowed to marry that person, then this waiving and allowance of him to enter a cemetery to deal with the burial does not apply to such a wife. But
What about if the Kohen's a rabbi?
if the Kohen's a rabbi, then he'll need to stand at a distance or get someone else to do the funerals.
The rabbi that married me was a Kohen.
Nice, right? I believe Rabbi Landau. Yeah, Rabbi Landau is a Kohen, and the way that it's set up at Harbor Lawn,
You used to stand on the side.
you stand on the street, then you're okay.
But,
All right.
But still, this line, a husband among his people shall not contaminate himself to one
Who desecrates him. Meaning, if this wife is a woman he was not allowed to marry, and therefore she is one lehechalo, that she, so to speak, desecrates him, meaning his marriage to her is a desecration of his status as a Kohen, then he's not allowed to be involved in the burial.
But then in the first place, he wasn't
He was not
allowed.
supposed to marry her, correct. Correct.
And if he does marry her, does he stop being a Kohen?
He will not be serving as a Kohen while he is married to her. It will not take away his status, right? But he will not be able to serve as a Kohen.
And his children will be still.
His children from her will not have the status of Kohen. Yeah. Okay. So let's understand this, guys. Let's get back to the point we wanted to touch on over here. So we have the Kohen. The Kohen is one of the points of kedusha, of holiness. That is the kedusha of the nefesh, of the soul, of the person. Why is it that dealing with a dead person, why is that considered tameh, impure, or even to the point of avi avot hatuma? Now we discussed this before. We discussed before the idea that tuma, when there was a potential for holiness that is no longer there, then that is filled with tuma. Okay, so we discussed that the potential of holiness in a person's life, of that which they can accomplish. Then at death, there's no longer that potential. We discussed even nida, the menstrual cycle, which was potential for life, that is no longer there. Right? We even discussed yoledet, right? But a yoledet, woman who gave birth. Right? Why the kedusha? Why there's tumah afterwards? That she had reached such a high level of being a creator. Then the point immediately afterwards is one that causes there to be tumah. But let's get to the root of this mita, of this death. According to the Torah, when did the concept of death come around? As a result of what did the concept of death come around?
Separation of soul and...
That's what it is. That's how we're going to define it. Separation of the physical and the spiritual.
The first murder.
Before the first murder.
Before the first
Gan Eden. What happened in Gan Eden?
They ate from the fruit.
The chet. The sin. Eating from the Eitz Hadat, from the tree of knowledge. That is what brought about this idea, this stage of death. What is an Aveira, and how does that link very specifically and very intimately to death?
Aveira, what's the
An Aveira, is a sin, a transgression.
It takes away a part of you. It diminishes you.
It diminishes you. Which part of you does it diminish? By doing what?
Doing physical.
No, by not being able to get high enough, you're not reaching, your spiritual to go up, you're going down. It's like...
Okay, so to a certain degree, it is a disconnect. It is a breach. It is a breach, a disconnect between us and God. That is what an Aveira is. An Aveira transgression is, there's meant to be this constant connection, and that is a break, that is a breach in that connection. What is the ultimate breach? of connection? Death. That is when the spirit, the neshama, the soul, completely separates from the physical body. So that idea that the aveira, the transgression, led to death, it's not a haphazard connection. That is a stage that Adam and Chava set in motion by causing there to be a breach. And the pasuk there says she saw it was ta'ava le'einayim, it was desirous for the eyes and for the heart, and right, it was going stages and stages we discussed before. So that's when I say I want to use this physical world not for a connection, but for a destruction or a distraction, or for my own personal wants and needs separated from God. Once there is that breach, that is what led to there being a stage of the ultimate breach. The ultimate breach is when the soul leaves the body. Now, of course, as we say very clearly in the second blessing of our Amid of Hashmona Esrei, that is not an eternal state. It's not an eternal stage. That is an interim stage where the neshama, the soul, goes to where it needs to go to. The body then decomposes in order that it can be rebuilt in a way that as it was back in Gan Eden, there could be that connection that would be an eternal connection. That's the Techias HaMesim. So why is it that a Kohen will need to stay away from a mate? From a body?
Because he's in a different state of being.
He's in a different state of being, but we all are. Why specifically Kohanim? Thank you very much. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro.
Amen.
Well, they can't get Tameh to do this third.
But why?
Oh.
The purpose of the service is to re-elevate us and bring us closer to Hashem. So if the Kohen is Tameh and has had that,
okay.
that void.
Good. Excellent. The root of the word korban we've discussed is korban is sacrifice. The root of the word korban is karov, close. The role of the Kohanim is through the avod, the service that they do on our behalf. The role of the Kohanim is to make that connection between the physical and the spiritual. Right? Stu didn't like it, but I'm going to come back to Kohen being gematria of 75. Right? That is the midpoint between the 7, the regular worldly cycles, and the 8, that which goes beyond it.
I buy it if it's 7.5.
I'm sorry?
7.5, I'll buy it.
I hear that also. Okay. That's a point that you're making. That's a point that you're making. But there are units of 1s, there are units of 10s.
Yes.
Right? Right? So 7.5 is exactly the same point between 7 and 8 as is 75 when we're dealing with the 10s.
True.
Okay. I don't back down so easy. Okay. Okay. So the role of the Kohen is to fuse those 2 points, the physical and the spiritual. Then he must stay away from something that is the epitome of the breach, of the separation. If his whole essence, his whole role is to make the connection, then he must stay away from the epitome of the disconnect. That's the...
It seems like a little paradox because Avayat Hamet is a mitzvah which should elevate us and bring us closer. So it seems like it's a category of mitzvah.
It can.
That
Yeah,
it's
it
not,
can.
a mixed bag.
It can, right? It's also metamteim et halev. It also causes there to be a blockage, right? A person can encounter that and have a sense of futility, right? You know, certainly in Kohelet, we have Shlomo Melech speaks about that, right? Everyone ends up in the same place. He writes, right? You know, what's it all worth? Is one way of, right? It can go either way, but certainly that's how we are meant to approach it. The different approaches that we can have to it, but at its essence, it is the disconnect. The Kohen, whose idea is the connection, he must stay away. Now, after we go through all of these laws of the Kohanim and the role that they need to play, just one second. Go on page 680, Perek Bet, Pasuk Lamed Aleph. Until this point, we've been dealing with the Kohanim, which is, we said, of the three aspects of Kedusha, of holiness. That's Kedusha of the Nefesh, of the person, of the soul. And the representatives, they are the Kohanim. But that doesn't exclude us. Ushmartem, Pasuk Lamed Aleph. Who'd like to take that for us? Savyon, why don't you take that for us? No pressure. Make your mom proud and happy.
Yeah.
All those dollars on private school education.
See that?
Ushamartem
Mitzvotai.
ועשיתם אותם אני השם.
Good. One more.
ולא תחללו את שם רשעי קדשי. והקדשתי בתוך בני ישראל אני השם מקדשכם.
Good. So take for us, please, in English, 31 and 32 and even 33.
You shall observe my commandments and perform them. I am Hashem. You shall not desecrate my holy name. Rather, I should be sanctified among the children of Israel. I am Hashem who sanctified you, who took you out of the land and took to be God to you. I am Hashem.
Okay, so here we have the idea of Nikdashti. Don't desecrate Shem Kadshi, my holy name, V'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisroel. Ani Hashem mikadishchem. I am Hashem who sanctifies you. So now we're talking about the Kedusha, not just of that group who are our 7.5 representatives, right? But rather they are, right? But rather the Kedusha of all of us. Of all of us. V'nikdashti ushmartem mitzvotai v'asitem otam ani Hashem. Observe my commandments, perform them. I am Hashem, and do not desecrate my holy name. Rather, I should be sanctified. V'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael.
What does sanctified mean?
Right? That's the Kedusha. Right? So right now we're saying that the Kedusha is the connection between us and God, right? And the three realms, right? So far we've been touching on that of Nefesh. What were the, of the soul, of the person. What were the other two realms we still need to come to? Time and place. Okay? So therefore, how do we become Kadosh? Meaning, as we're explaining now, how are we making that connection between the physical and the spiritual?
Observe the commandments.
Observe the commandments. That's what the mitzvot are. The mitzvot are the ways to, in this physical world, connect beyond the physical. That's how we reach beyond the constraints of this physical world. When we make the brachot after getting an aliyah, we say v'chaye olam nata b'tochenu. Chaye olam, eternal life. Nata, you planted that where? B'tochenu. Right here. And every blessing that we make before performing a mitzvah is asher kiddishanu. Oh, that's the same word, isn't it? Asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav. That you have sanctified us with the mitzvah. Now, this mitzvah of kiddush Hashem actually is a pretty wild mitzvah. Kiddush Hashem literally means sanctification of God's name, which in a very beautiful way we do when we hold open the door for someone else in a store and they realize, oh, here's a Jewish person holding it, right? We do Kiddush Hashem all the time. But really at its core, at its essence, this is talking about the idea that even though we say v'chai b'hem v'lo shiyamut b'hem, that a person for everything we make sure that we stay alive, and will break Shabbos in a moment in order to save a life, even in order to save Chaye Shah, in order to preserve a life for a shortened period of time. Right? I mentioned last night, we had this came in the Navi class also last night. I think it was when we saw Salanta, there's a tremendous plague that was going on. So he had all of his students involved in dealing with the sick. Right? And he told them, Shabbos is no Shabbos. Do what they need. So someone said to him, how can you be so lenient when it comes to Shabbos? And he said, I'm not being lenient about Shabbos. I'm being strict about pikuach nefesh, about saving lives. But there are three aveirot, the three cardinal sins for which a person is meant to give up their life. And those are idolatry, adultery or incest, and murder. What is the idea of the Kiddush Hashem at that point? Why does one give up their life for that, but not for the other mitzvah? Why would one give up their life? What is the understanding? What is the foundation that's taking place there?
The breach is just too great.
The breach is just too great. Beautiful, Amy. The breach is just so great that you can't continue to live with that breach. At that point, right? We don't give up our own. We don't take our own life. But if it means do this or we will kill you, so be it. So be it. But that is the idea of the kedusha, of the connection that is meant to be there, that is meant to take place.
In that case, capital punishment is justified for a moment.
Okay, so yes and no. We're not. No, in that this is not an example of capital punishment. This is not an example of capital punishment. But the Torah does hold of capital punishment. Keep in mind that the Mishnah says that a Beit Din that kills once in 7 years was considered a murderous Beit Din. And the other opinion says once in 70 years. And the Gemara is unsure. Are we saying once in 70 that was the norm? Or are we saying once in 70 that's considered murderous? Okay? But either way, it did not happen often. And when it did happen, it was a very intense teshuvah process. Meaning the person would make kiddush before the capital punishment. He would say vidui, confession. The person would make kiddush. And when they would hear that person making kiddush, those around would say lemita. Le to mita, to death. That is one of the reasons why we have a custom that, what do we say? L'chaim. Right? To life. because then they would say lamita, right? So to keep in mind that it was a very intense teshuva process. It was the same idea that the person has done something that is so severe that just carrying on and giving your 1/10 tzedakah and making your bracha before you eat and making sure to wash negel vas in the morning and learning Torah and lighting Shabbos candles and all that is just not going to cut it anymore, because the breach that was made was so great. And nowadays we don't have this capital punishment. Now you'll say that's because we don't have a Beit Din. But I think it goes a lot further than that. And that there is no way that we could ever reinstitute a Beit Din of that severity, of that magnitude, until there is this re-education and there is this understanding of what these mitzvot are, of what Hashem is, of what we are, of what this world is. And only with that can a person understand the severity of these different mitzvot. Okay, so it's similar, but not, right? So yes, it's a similar breach, but this is not talking about capital punishment. This is talking about a gun against the head. Murder that person or I'm going to kill you. Kill that person or I'm going to kill you. Person can't do anything. Yeah, go.
Isn't there like an atonement at that point too?
Yes. The same way that we discussed by the korban, a sacrifice is meant to be an intense teshuva process using a proxy, right? So over here, by a capital punishment, there is no proxy. There is no proxy. That is the kedusha of the nefesh. Let's continue on 682. By the Ber Hashem Moshe Leimor, who'd like to take for us in Hebrew, Perich of Gimel, Daber B'nai Yisroel, Pasuk Bet.
Daber B'nai Yisroel Yamata, Aleihem Moadei Hashem Asher Tikru'u Otam Mikra'ei Kodesh Elohim Moadai. Sheshet Yamin Ta'aseh, Melacha V'yom Hashvi'i Shabbat Shabbaton, Mikra Kodesh Kol Melacha. Mikra Kodesh Kol Melacha Lo Sa'asu, Shabbos Hi L'Hashem B'chol Mosh.
Beautiful. In English, 23. Amy, you have your glasses? No excuses?
Yeah, Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, Hashem's appointed festivals that you are to designate as holy convocations. These are my appointed festivals. For 6 days labor may be done, and the 7th day is a day of complete rest, a holy convocation. You shall not do any work. It is a Sabbath for Hashem in all your dwelling places."
Beautiful. So, the Kedusha of Zman, the holiness of time, is Shabbat. Shabbos. And how do we how is Shabbos done? By not doing any melacha. Okay. So how does Shabbos fit into this theme of Kedusha? This is Kedushat Hazman, sanctification of time. How is Shabbos fitting in?
So,
Janet.
as much as possible, you're separating your daily stuff that you would do in time from this period of time, and then you're also not doing so much physical stuff as much, like you're not necessarily lifting or carrying. And
Okay, so
not
good. So it's a separation from that which we are normally involving ourselves. We're normally involving ourselves in creative activities, right? It doesn't speak about not doing avoda. Avoda, we would define that as labor, right? If a person wants to hoist their refrigerator up onto their back, ever see in Israel how they carry refrigerators around, right? If you want to hoist your refrigerator up onto your back, right, and carry like that, right, up and down the steps from room to room, the entire Shabbos, have you broken Shabbos in doing so? No. But the light switch.
You may have broken your back by then.
The light switch. That's true. The light switch. That's... So we're not talking about avoda. Right? I told you the story of I think it's Rabbi Becker, where Mordechai Becker tells a story that he was at a hotel on Shabbos, and there was no Shabbos elevator, and they put him up onto the 14th floor. So there he is walking up, right? By the time he's at the 12th, 13th floor, he's schwitzing, he's sweaty, he's hot, right? And who uses that? Who uses the stairwell? Mostly it's service stairwells. So he passes some of the workers of the hotel, and they give him a quizzical look, like, why? Right? And he said, "Oh, it's my day of rest." That explains it, right? But in a way, yes, right? Because the idea over here is not avoda, it is malacha. It's not labor, it is creative activities, and we are commissioned to use our creativity, and that's what 6 days you shall do it. Comes the 7th day, we're no longer working on acting upon and changing the environment, but rather we are basking in the glory of Hashem's world. So a change comes about by that light switch, not by moving. The refrigerators was a bad example. It's unplugged, or moving a couch around. Okay?
So can you play chess?
I'm sorry?
Can you play chess?
I can play chess. Can you play chess? No. Yeah, you can play chess.
Very creative exercise.
Yes, we could also learn Torah. In other words, you make an excellent point, but the creativity over here is not creating, brain cells or neurological pathways. The creativity is in the physical world, right? But certainly studying and such creativity.
In other words, you're not creating something from nothing. Whereas with electricity, you're creating light, which was something. You're now creating something from nothing. Whereas your brain is there, and you're using it. That's a very different thing.
Yeah. So Shabbos is the kedusha of the Zman, where we are meant to make Shabbos oneg. Oneg is enjoyable, right? And we dressed nicer on Shabbat than we do during the week, and we eat, right? On a Friday night, let me say, every course on Friday night is like a full meal during the week, right? As parents, why aren't they eating? Why aren't the kids eating? They already ate 2 courses. By the time they get to the main course, they've had already 2 full meals of what they normally would eat during the week, right? So it's the garments that are nice. It is the food that is nice. Everything. Why is that important? Special. But beyond, special what? That we want to make the connection between the physical and the spiritual. It is making that connection. Not being out there trying to change, but taking what we have and guiding that, connecting that. Right? The antithesis of the breach. Using that which we have for kedusha, which we are defining now as connection, as an uplifting of the physical. Going back to the numbers for a moment, so it's interesting. We say sheishet yamim te'aseh malacha, right? We don't say for 6 days do malacha. We say 6 days do malacha. 6 6 represents space, right? When we are in 3 dimensions, so basically we're in the cube.
We're in the cube is 6.
Right? You have the 4 directions and up and down. That is, this whole physical world is 6. 7th, we said, was the holiness within that cycle. What is the 7th? The 7th is that midpoint, is that purpose, is that meaning, is that essence of all of the physical. So we have the 6 days and then the 7th day. The 7th day is the essence, is the purpose of this 3-dimensional physical world that we have. That is that point in the middle. That is the essence, and that is what gives the meaning to everything else that goes on. So Shabbos is what gives the meaning to the other 6 days. When we take all of that and we focus that to Hashem, and we connect to Hashem during that zaman, during that time, that is the second of the dimensions. There's nefesh, there is zaman, there is time. Shabbos is the kedusha of the zman, of the time, where we have that connection that is made. And that's the idea of the dressing nicely and eating well. You know, a lot of our zemirot, our Friday night songs, right? Some of them are actually barburim, litaneg, v'sanugim, barburim, usla v'dagim. Right? Litaneg, v'tanugim. To enjoy these delicacies, barburim, usla v'dagim. Ducks, geese, and fish. Everybody, ducks, geese, and fish. Right? We're singing about ducks, geese, and fish. Right? That's what we're singing about over here. We're not talking about, this spiritual enlightening, and now certainly if we were writing this mirror now, cholent would have to be on that list. Right? They take out the duck and put in the cholent. Right? That's what we're singing about. But I forget who gives, maybe it's the Dubna Nagi, gives a mashal, gives a parable of a prince who's thrown into prison. And there he's not allowed to have any signs of happiness. If he shows any signs of happiness, they come and they really persecute him there. And then he received a letter from his father, which was a connection from his father, the king, and he was so elated, but he couldn't express that happiness. So what did he do? He managed to smuggle in a bottle of booze, which he then gave out to the guards there. So they all drank and they were all feeling good, and then when they're all, in their drunken revelry, smiling and happy and singing, right, he too then is able to be smiling, happy, and sing. But they're doing it in their drunken revelry, and he is doing it because he has this reconnection he heard from his father, the king. So I believe the Dubna Magid who gave this example. So on Shabbos, all week long we have our guard. The guard for our neshama is our body, and we're worried about this bill and this to take care of and that to take care of. So the neshama can't sing out. Comes Shabbos, that's when the neshama gets this message from the king, and it wants to be elated, but it can't because the guards doesn't allow it. So what do? We feed the guards, the geese, the ducks, the fish, the wine, the cholent. Right? We allow the body to be satisfied, and then the soul can soar and make that connection. But it's interesting. But it's a connection of the two of them together, which was the kedusha. Lastly, we have the makom, the place. So you all said, what is the kedusha of the makom? Of the place. What is the holiness of the place? Right? Hashem is called Hamakom, but in our world, the kedusha of place is Yerushalayim, in the Beis Hamikdash. And what do we have over here? Now we have our Shalosh Regalim. Let's take that from Pasuk Dalet. Read a few from Pasuk Dalet. Chayrifka, you want to take that for us?
We're talking about 23:4.
Yeah, but we want to take it in Hebrew first? Or
Sorry, I'll try. I am not the best in Hebrew. Ele moadeh Adonai mikrae kodesh asher tikra'u otam b'moadim.
Good.
That's enough.
Good. Okay, someone take first a string there in English. These are?
These are the appointed festival of Hashem, the holy convocations, which you shall designate in their appropriate time. In the first month, on the 14th of the month, in the afternoon is the time of the Pesach offering to Hashem. And on the 15th day of this month is the festival of Matzah to Hashem. You shall eat matzahs for a 7-day period. On the first day there shall be a holy convocation for you. You shall do no laborious work. You shall bring a fire offering to Hashem for a 7-day period. On the 7th day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no laborious work.
Interesting. So over here is talking about melechet avodah. Remember I mentioned before there's malacha, there's labor, and there's work. Okay, so why are the Moadim, why would these holidays represent Kedushat Hazman, the holiness of, Kedushat HaMakom, the holiness of the place? Aliyat Regel. What we have to do is we all must go and ascend to Yerushalayim. They're called the Shloshat Regalim. What's a Regalim? Legs. Right? And they're holidays, but we call this holiday by the same root as the word of regel, of the legs, right? Because the idea is, right, exactly, beautiful. They're called the pilgrimage holidays. The whole idea is to make that pilgrimage, to go to the place. They're called a moed, a moadei Hashem. What is a moed?
Meeting place, appointed meeting.
A meeting place. That's what a moed is. A moed is a meeting place. And therefore, during these 3 holidays, we need to all go and convene. We need to all go and meet. And when we go to Yerushalayim, what are we leaving behind? What are we separating from?
Our personal
Possessions. Yeah, our possessions, our personal dealings, right? That we leave all of that behind and we go to Yerushalayim. We go to the Makom. So we are surrounded. We are constantly surrounded by these opportunities of Kedusha, of connection being made. We have the nefesh, the soul, and for the Kohanim, they are at a higher level. They must stay away from any sort, certainly from the epitome of that breach. We have but for all of us, we have those mitzvot, which serve as the connectors for us, the way that we make our connections. And then we have our Shabbos as a weekly island of the Kedusha of the Zman. And then we all have to go to Yerushalayim. And there's so many mitzvot that bring us to Yerushalayim. Right? We have the Sholosh Regalim, as Marta said, the pilgrimage holidays. We also have the mitzvah of Maser Sheni. Maser Sheni is one of the tithes that we separate from our produce. And that must be eaten in Yerushalayim or transferred onto money, and the money must be spent on food stuff in Yerushalayim. Then we need to keep being drawn back to leave everything else behind. Now we're going to go back to there. We're meant to go back home afterwards. We need to be involved in this world, but it needs to be with that perspective. And it's all about the perspective that we have, the priorities that we have. What is this being used for? Why was this given to me? How do I best utilize this to maximize the time granted to me on this earth. Why was this given to me? We discussed a number of times the idea that, everyone wants, if I'd win the Powerball, the Powerball, for 300 and who knows, 400, who knows how many million, right? It is, right? That's actually a scary thing, right? If a person has means like that, the person needs to ask themselves, well, why has God given me that means? Right? What does He want me to do with that? And that's a heavy responsibility. That's a very, very heavy. I know people say, "Oh, I'll worry about it then." But that's a heavy, heavy responsibility. And really, all the things that we have are our responsibilities if they're given to us, right? So we have these constant. We're surrounded by these different avenues for which which are there to give us the opportunities of connection. And the regel, what do we say in our holiday davening? V'hasienu Hashem Elokeinu birkas moadecha. Right? I'm sorry? Lift us up. V'hasienu. Lift us up. Right? Birkat moadecha, the blessing of the holiday. Meaning, the idea is that we have this holiday, but then we walk away in an uplifted fashion. Right? We have had a shift. We're able to reprioritize. We come back with a fresh perspective. And we have these constant islands. Right? We have Steve has a song, Islands of Time. And that's Shabbos. Right? Steve has a beautiful song about Shabbos that he titled Steve Kaufman. Island of Time. We have these islands of time. We have these islands of place that we travel there. Regel, the holidays, the Moadim. And we have the mitzvot that constantly surround us. So Emor, Parshas Emor is really a continuation of Kedoshim Tihiyu, giving us these different, or not giving us, but illustrating for us, pointing out for us these different flashpoints, right? And of course, Pasuk Dalet began as Chayrus read, Eila Modei Hashem, Mikra'ei Kodesh, right? These are the Mikra'ei Kodesh, and Shabbos was Kodesh, Mikra Kodesh, Komolacha Lo Ta'asu, and by the Kiddush Hashem, it was V'Itkadishtem, and the Kohanim are called Kadosh. These are all the environment that we are surrounded with, which gives us all of these avenues, all these opportunities of kedusha, of making that connection. Yes.
So in these days, without the big Hamikdash, when people don't generally all do pilgrimage, would one say also kedusha spaces anywhere where there's an aroma and a Torah?
Well, yeah. A shul is called a mikdash ma'at, right? A microcosm of the mikdash, right? Certainly, visiting Israel and going to the Kotel, that also, certainly touches us on a more regular basis. The Beit Knesset, the shul, is called a mikdash ma'at.
So, is it prescriptive that maybe for these shalosh regalim that we should try to go to Yerushalayim?
One is not fulfilling a mitzvat aseh nowadays by doing that. Is it something that one should, attempt to do, aspire to do? Absolutely. Absolutely.
But does it have to be only on Pesach?
Again, it doesn't have to be at any time now without a Beit HaMikdash, right? We just read the first. It's all the Shalosh Regalim. It's Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Those are the pilgrimage holidays. Okay, we'll call it over here, everybody. Thank you. It's a very good day. I have a rabbinic conference next week in San Diego. I'm not sure what time I need to leave. It's Tuesday, Wednesday.